En Anchio Anbrai, in Try, Venezuela just did something brutal. US just trapped Maduro's entire fleet. Venezuela believed its naval fleet could operate freely in Caribbean waters, projecting power across the region while evading international pressure. However, a coordinated U.S. intelligence operation just revealed that every single Venezuelan warship is now locked inside what military analysts are calling an inescapable maritime cage. Between March 15th and March 22, 2026, the United States Navy executed a precision surveillance and interdiction strategy that has effectively paralyzed Venezuela's entire naval capability without firing a single shot. This is not a routine maritime patrol operation. This represents the complete operational collapse of a nation's naval force through technological superiority and strategic positioning that Nicolás Maduro never saw coming. The images you are about to see on your screens will demonstrate how modern naval warfare has evolved beyond direct confrontation into something far more sophisticated and devastating. What you see is not just ships being monitored. This is the systematic elimination of a nation's ability to project maritime power. But that is not the most shocking detail. There are three critical factors that created this unprecedented naval trap. The first involves advanced satellite surveillance systems, tracking every Venezuelan vessel in real time with meter-level precision. The second concerns a network of underwater sensor arrays that the U.S. Navy deployed across key Caribbean choke points over the past 18 months. The third factor, which we will explore in detail later in this video, involves diplomatic coordination with neighboring nations that has turned the entire Caribbean into a monitored zone where Venezuelan warships cannot move without immediate detection and response. We will explain the technical mechanisms behind this maritime cage in the later parts of the video. Now we must look at how this operation unfolded. On March 15, 2026, Venezuelan Navy Commander Admiral Remigio Ceballos ordered the frigate ARBV Almirante Brion to conduct what Caracas described as routine training exercises approximately 80 nautical miles north of La Guaira port. The vessel, a modified Italian Lupo-class frigate representing Venezuela's most capable surface combatant, departed with a crew of 187 personnel. Venezuelan state television broadcast footage showing the departure, with government officials claiming the exercise demonstrated national sovereignty and military readiness. Within 6 hours of the Almirante Brion leaving port, United States Southern Command had established continuous tracking using a combination of P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, satellite imagery from the National Reconnaissance Office, and surface vessels from the U.S. Navy's Fourth Fleet. According to reports from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the tracking operation involved coordination between at least 5 different U.S. intelligence and military assets, simultaneously monitoring the single Venezuelan frigate. The Almirante Brion never traveled beyond U.S. surveillance coverage for even 60 seconds during its entire deployment, but the operation extended far beyond a single vessel. Intelligence assessments from the Institute for the Study of War indicate that between March 15th and March 20th, the United States established comprehensive tracking of Venezuela's entire operational naval fleet. This includes 4 Lupo-class frigates, 6 Constitucion-class patrol vessels, 2 Type 209 submarines purchased from Germany in the 1970s, and approximately 12 smaller patrol craft. The total displacement represents roughly 32,000 tons of naval vessels. A modest force compared to regional powers, but significant enough to threaten commercial shipping or conduct limited power projection operations. Every single vessel is now under continuous U.S. surveillance using what defense analysts describe as the most comprehensive maritime tracking operation in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The technical architecture enabling this surveillance represents a quantum leap beyond traditional naval monitoring. The United States Navy deployed a system known as the Integrated Undersea Surveillance System Phase 4, which combines fixed underwater hydrophone arrays with mobile autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with advanced acoustic sensors. These sensors can detect submarine signatures at ranges exceeding 300 nautical miles while simultaneously tracking surface vessels through acoustic signature analysis. According to leaked Navy protocols reported by Defense News, the system achieved a 98% detection rate during testing phases, meaning virtually no vessel can traverse monitored waters without identification. The Caribbean Basin, with its relatively confined geography and limited deep water channels, creates ideal conditions for comprehensive acoustic surveillance coverage. Satellite surveillance provides the visual confirmation layer. The National Reconnaissance Office maintains at least 4 reconnaissance satellites optimized for maritime tracking, employing synthetic aperture radar that can detect vessels regardless of cloud cover or darkness. These satellites achieve resolution capabilities of approximately 1 meter, allowing identification of specific vessel classes and even detection of deck-mounted weapon systems. When combined with commercial satellite imagery from companies like Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies, the United States maintains near-continuous visual coverage of Caribbean waters. Venezuelan naval vessels attempting to evade detection would need to remain submerged indefinitely, or somehow mask their radar signatures, neither of which their aging Soviet-era and Italian-manufactured vessels can accomplish. The surface layer involves the U.S. Navy's 4th Fleet, which operates from Naval Station Mayport in Florida. According to U.S. Southern Command statements, the 4th Fleet maintains a continuous rotation of at least 2 destroyers, 1 cruiser, and multiple patrol vessels throughout Caribbean and Latin American waters. These surface combatants carry Aegis combat systems capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously while coordinating with aerial and space-based assets. The result creates what naval strategists call a fused maritime picture, where every vessel within the operational area appears on a unified tracking display updated in real time. Venezuelan warships operating in this environment face the same level of transparency as civilian merchant vessels broadcasting automatic identification system signals. This surveillance architecture transforms into an operational trap through strategic positioning and diplomatic coordination. The United States established what amounts to a maritime exclusion zone without formally declaring one. Venezuelan vessels attempting to transit beyond territorial waters immediately face response options ranging from diplomatic protest to direct interdiction. The key choke points include the Windward Passage between Cuba and Haiti, the Mona Passage between Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and the various channels of the Lesser Antilles island chain. Each represents a narrow transit corridor where submarine detection becomes virtually guaranteed and surface vessel tracking reaches maximum effectiveness. According to German intelligence assessments reported by Der Spiegel, the United States coordinated with Trinidad and Tobago, Colombia, and several Caribbean island nations to establish refueling denial for Venezuelan naval vessels, effectively limiting their operational range to waters immediately adjacent to Venezuela's coast. The strategic implications extend far beyond simple surveillance. Venezuela's naval capability existed primarily to deter intervention, protect offshore oil installations, and project symbolic power throughout the region. The Maduro regime repeatedly threatened to disrupt shipping lanes or challenge what Caracas describes as imperialist encroachment on Venezuelan sovereignty. These threats depended entirely on the ability to operate naval forces beyond immediate coastal waters with some degree of tactical surprise. That capability no longer exists. Every Venezuelan naval movement now occurs under complete U.S. observation, eliminating any possibility of surprise operations or unpredictable deployment. The psychological impact on Venezuelan naval commanders cannot be overstated. They must operate knowing that every maneuver, every training exercise, every attempted patrol generates immediate response planning from a military force possessing overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. The economic dimension compounds the operational paralysis. Venezuela's economy, devastated by years of mismanagement, corruption, and international sanctions, cannot sustain meaningful naval operations even under normal circumstances. According to Bloomberg Economics Analysis, Venezuela's defense budget collapsed to approximately $400 million annually, down from nearly $4 billion in 2012. This represents an 88% reduction in real defense spending over 14 years. The naval component receives an estimated $60 to $80 million, barely sufficient to maintain basic operations and certainly inadequate to contest even modest U.S. naval presence. Venezuelan warships face chronic fuel shortages, spare parts scarcity, and maintenance backlogs that render substantial portions of the fleet unseaworthy at any given time. The 2 Type 209 submarines have not conducted submerged operations exceeding 72 hours since 2019 due to battery and mechanical failures. Surface vessels regularly operate with degraded radar systems, outdated weapons, and insufficient crew training. This brings us to the geopolitical context that makes the U.S. operation particularly significant. Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro aligned itself closely with Russia, China, and Iran, positioning Caracas as part of an anti-American axis, challenging U.S. hemispheric influence. Maduro hosted Russian military advisors, accepted Chinese investment in oil infrastructure, and maintained close ties with Tehran despite international pressure. These relationships created perception that Venezuela possessed backing from major powers capable of constraining U.S. action. The complete neutralization of Venezuela's naval capability without any response from Moscow, Beijing, or Tehran demonstrates the limits of these partnerships when confronting direct U.S. military superiority in the Western Hemisphere. Russia cannot project meaningful naval power across the Atlantic to defend Venezuelan interests. China lacks both the capability and willingness to challenge U.S. naval dominance in Caribbean waters. Iran possesses no capacity whatsoever to influence Caribbean maritime dynamics. Venezuela's anti-American partnerships provide diplomatic support and economic assistance, but offer zero protection against operational U.S. actions within what Washington considers its strategic backyard. The Colombian dimension adds crucial context. Colombia, under increasingly conservative leadership, has strengthened military cooperation with the United States while adopting harder line toward Maduro's government. According to Radio Free Europe reporting, Colombian naval forces now coordinate regularly with U.S. Fourth Fleet operations, sharing intelligence and conducting joint patrols along the Caribbean coast. This partnership effectively extends U.S. surveillance coverage while providing regional legitimacy for maritime monitoring operations. Venezuelan vessels attempting to transit waters near Colombian territory face dual tracking from both U.S. and Colombian assets, further constraining operational options. The Venezuela-Colombia maritime boundary disputes, particularly concerning offshore oil exploration blocks, create additional justification for enhanced surveillance framed as prevention of territorial violations. Trinidad and Tobago's participation represents another strategic element. The twin island nation sits just 11 kilometers from Venezuela's northeastern coast, controlling access to the southern Caribbean. According to Caribbean intelligence reports, Trinidad and Tobago granted the United States expanded access to maritime patrol facilities while agreeing to deny port access and refueling to Venezuelan military vessels. This creates an additional barrier preventing Venezuelan naval operations from extending into the broader Caribbean basin. Venezuelan warships effectively face a maritime wall beginning just beyond their territorial waters, with every direction offering only increased U.S. surveillance density and decreased operational space. The psychological dimension reveals the human cost of this strategic encirclement. Venezuelan naval officers trained for decades to operate as proud defenders of national sovereignty now find themselves commanding vessels that function as tracked targets rather than credible military assets. According to leaked internal communications reported by Venezuelan opposition media, morale within the Venezuelan Navy has collapsed to crisis levels. Officers recognize that any operational deployment beyond coastal waters invites not just surveillance but potential interdiction with zero capacity for effective response. The professional humiliation of commanding warships that exist purely as monitoring subjects rather than combat-capable vessels creates internal pressure that undermines unit cohesion and operational readiness. Sailors question why they should risk their lives maintaining and operating vessels that possess no realistic combat capability against the forces tracking them. The Maduro regime faces impossible political calculations. Acknowledging the surveillance and operational paralysis would represent devastating admission of military weakness and strategic failure. Continuing to deploy naval vessels while pretending surveillance does not exist maintains facade of sovereignty but accomplishes nothing operationally while wasting scarce resources. Escalating rhetoric to match the operational reality risks provoking U.S. actions that could extend beyond surveillance to active interdiction or even targeted strikes against naval infrastructure. According to Politico reporting, internal debates within Maduro's security apparatus have become increasingly contentious as military leaders recognize the futility of current posture, while political leadership demands maintenance of aggressive public stance. The disconnect between political rhetoric and operational reality creates cognitive dissonance that corrodes institutional effectiveness. Individual sailors experience the contradiction most acutely. A young Venezuelan naval rating standing watch aboard a patrol vessel knows that sophisticated U.S. sensors track his ship's position continuously. He understands that his vessel's radar systems cannot detect the surveillance platforms monitoring him. He recognizes that his ship's weapons, even if functional, could not engage targets possessing the range, accuracy, and countermeasures that U.S. systems deploy. The psychological impact of this power asymmetry transforms naval service from proud defense of sovereignty into mere performance of military theater for domestic political consumption. According to testimonies collected by human rights organizations, Venezuelan military personnel increasingly seek ways to abandon service or defect rather than participate in operationally meaningless deployments that serve only Maduro's political narratives. Looking toward future developments, the U.S. operation establishes precedent for non-kinetic neutralization of adversary military capabilities through technological superiority and strategic positioning. This model could extend to other contexts where the United States seeks to constrain adversary actions without triggering direct military confrontation. The surveillance cage around Venezuelan naval forces demonstrates that modern sensor networks, when combined with strategic geography and diplomatic coordination, can achieve operational paralysis without firing weapons. This represents evolution in deterrence and coercion that relies on information dominance rather than kinetic superiority. The implications extend beyond Venezuela to any nation operating modest military forces in regions where the United States can establish comprehensive surveillance architecture. The coming months will test whether Maduro attempts to challenge the surveillance cage through provocative deployments or instead accepts the operational reality and scales back naval activities to preserve scarce resources. According to U.S. intelligence assessments leaked to The Washington Post, Analysis suggests Maduro will likely maintain symbolic deployments for domestic political purposes while avoiding actions that might provoke U.S. interdiction. This creates stable but deeply asymmetric status quo, where Venezuelan naval forces exist in name but lack genuine operational capability. The long-term trajectory points toward continued degradation of Venezuelan naval capability through combination of economic constraints, technological obsolescence, and psychological demoralization that the surveillance cage accelerates. Within 5 years, Venezuela may possess only token naval presence incapable of sustained operations even in coastal waters. The regional implications suggest that U.S. maritime dominance in the Caribbean basin has reached unprecedented levels. No nation in the region possesses capability to challenge U.S. naval operations or evade U.S. surveillance coverage. This maritime hegemony provides Washington with complete freedom of action while denying potential adversaries any capacity for surprise or effective response. The stability this creates serves U.S. interests but generates resentment among nations sensitive to perceived imperial overreach. The balance between security benefits and diplomatic costs will shape how aggressively the United States employs surveillance cage model in other contexts. For Venezuela, the naval trap represents microcosm of broader strategic failure. The Maduro regime's alignment with Russia, China, and Iran produced diplomatic solidarity but zero operational support when confronting U.S. military action. Venezuela's economic collapse eliminated resources necessary to maintain even modest military capability. The regime's international isolation prevented coalition building that might have complicated U.S. operations through multilateral pressure. The result leaves Venezuela possessing symbolic military forces that exist purely for domestic political theater rather than genuine defense or deterrence. The Navy trapped under continuous U.S. surveillance embodies the complete failure of Maduro's strategic vision. What are your thoughts on this unprecedented surveillance operation and its implications for maritime sovereignty? Don't forget to share your perspective in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like our video. Maduro set out to challenge American hegemony and project Venezuelan power across the Caribbean. Today he commands a navy that cannot leave port without complete U.S. surveillance tracking every movement. The maritime cage demonstrates that in modern naval warfare, technological superiority can achieve what previous generations required blockades and direct confrontation to accomplish. Presented by TGN. Thank you for choosing us.